You don't belong in this seat. People like you should stay in the back." The words hit the cabin like a slap. Clara White, 42, said it without hesitation. Her voice was crisp, cutting through the muted hum of the aircraft. She sat in 2A, sunglasses still on, her blonde hair immaculate. Her Louis Vuitton shopping bag sprawled deliberately across the cushion like a barrier. Marcus Johnson, 38, paused in the aisle. Black hoodie, dark jeans, boarding pass in hand. No jewellery, no entourage, nothing that screamed wealth. Exactly how he intended it. His eyes lowered briefly to the ticket, 2A first, before lifting back to Clara, calm and steady. Clara smirked, shifting the bag to claim more of the seat. "See? Already taken. Try economy, sir." Her tone dripped with the ease of someone used to being obeyed. Passengers turned. A man in row 3 lowered his magazine, 45, eyes narrowing. Across the aisle, a woman in her 30s tilted her phone, recording quietly. The soft cabin air thickened, no longer peaceful but tense. Nicole Harris, 35, lead flight attendant, approached with a clipped stride. She glanced once at Clara, who gave a slight nod, then at Marcus. Without asking for proof, Nicole said, "Sir, this area is for premium guests. I'll need you to return to coach." Marcus extended his boarding pass. No tremor in his hand, no rush in his voice, just quiet presence. Nicole didn't even glance at it. Clara let out a laugh sharp enough to sting. "That printout, please. I've seen people try this before. Fake tickets, fake cards, always the same story." And then the insult escalated. Clara pressed her palm firmly onto the headrest, leaning in close, her voice low but venomous. "Face it, you don't look like first class." A collective intake of breath rippled down the aisle. The man in row 3 muttered under his breath, "That's not right." A passenger 2 rows back whispered, "Someone's filming this already." Marcus exhaled once, slow and deliberate. No sharp retort, no defensive shout. His silence carried more weight than any argument. He stood anchored, unshaken, as if the storm couldn't move him. Nicole folded her arms, voice hardening. "Sir, if you don't comply, I'll call security." The words carried the force of policy, but her eyes betrayed something less professional. Assumption, dismissal, a judgment made before fact. Marcus blinked once, slow, measured. He had seen this scene before, just dressed in different uniforms. At 25, a banker had called him too risky, while ignoring his triple collateral. At 32, a hotel manager refused him a suite, saying he didn't look like the type. And now at 38, in seat 2A, the judgment appeared again. Same script, new stage, the cabin leaned in collectively, phones tilted higher, breath held. Nobody realized yet that this was the wrong passenger to corner, in the wrong seat, on the wrong day. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus. He hadn't spoken a word yet, but the storm had already begun. The boarding pass in Marcus's hand still read the same. Seat 2A, first class, paid in full. But in the eyes of the cabin, that slip of paper looked like fiction. He stood in the narrow aisle, shoulders squared, calm as stone. 38 years old, a face disciplined by years of boardroom battles, yet dressed like any traveller heading home. Black hoodie, clean sneakers, no watch worth bragging about, no visible status. That, too, was intentional, because Marcus Johnson never boarded flights to be recognised. He boarded to observe passengers read him differently. To Clara, he was an intruder. To Nicole, a problem to be managed. To the scattered onlookers, he was another passenger holding up departure. And yet, to Marcus, this was a familiar stage. The first-class cabin, usually cocooned in quiet, the clink of glasses, the soft shuffle of boarding, was now tuned to a sharper frequency. A murmur here. A hushed comment there. From row 4, a man in his 40s whispered, "Looks like he sat in the wrong cabin." His seatmate, a woman around 30, shook her head, eyes fixed on Marcus's pass. Or maybe he didn't. Nicole's voice cut in again, firm and rehearsed. "Sir, let's not hold up other guests. Please move back." She motioned toward the curtain dividing first class from the rest of the plane. Her tone wasn't offering choice. It was delivering expectation. Clara folded her arms, leaning into her performance. "Exactly. You're making a scene. Just go where you belong." Marcus didn't shift. He didn't raise his voice. He simply remained, a still point in a room tilting against him. His silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. The woman with the phone across the aisle angled her lens higher. Late 30s, steady hands, determined expression. She mouthed to her neighbour, "This doesn't look right." The red record light glowed brighter, capturing every exchange, every insult. Someone in the back coughed awkwardly. Another voice, deeper, mid-40s, muttered, "He should just move." Yet another responded, "Not if it's his seat." The debate wasn't contained anymore. The cabin itself was now divided, first class splintering into factions over one man's presence. Nicole exhaled sharply. "Sir, last time I'll ask, move, or I'll have to escalate this." Marcus's eyes flicked from the ticket in his hand to the nameplate on her uniform. He didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He simply held her gaze, calm as a tide unmoved by wind. Because Marcus knew what no one else did, that every second of dismissal, every word of assumption, was evidence. Evidence of a system still blind to the power standing quietly in its aisle. The cabin didn't know it yet, but the balance of this flight was already shifting. Nicole straightened her blazer, planting herself firmly in the aisle. Her tone sharpened. "Sir, I won't ask again. Economy is that way." She tilted her head toward the curtain, as though the direction of someone's worth could be reduced to fabric and thread. Clara White, still settled in seat 2A like a queen guarding a throne, tossed her sunglasses onto the tray table. She was 42, practiced in the art of performance. Her voice rose louder now, meant for the entire cabin. "I paid for this seat. I don't know what scam he's running, but it needs to end before takeoff." The insult hung in the air like smoke. A ripple moved through the rows. From row 3, David Lawson, 45, shifted uncomfortably. He muttered to his seatmate, "They haven't even looked at his ticket." His companion, early 30s, frowned. "Doesn't matter to them. Look at how they're treating him." Nicole extended a hand, palm up. "Your boarding pass, sir." Her voice was clipped, controlled, but her body leaned forward like an officer demanding surrender. Marcus placed the pass into her hand, calm and deliberate. She glanced at it, too quickly as though reading it might risk proving her wrong, then snapped it shut without acknowledging the details. "Not valid," she said flatly. Clara smirked. "Told you?" She shoved her designer bag further into the seat, blocking any attempt Marcus might make to sit. "You people always think you can slide into places you don't belong." Gasps fluttered from 2 rows back. A woman in her late 30s angled her phone higher. "She said you people," she whispered, the recording light glowing red. Nicole cleared her throat, louder this time. "Security will be notified if you refuse to move." She didn't lower her voice. She wanted the words to sting. Marcus didn't rise, didn't flinch. His hands rested lightly at his sides, posture steady as if anchored to the floor. His silence pressed harder than protest, and that silence unnerved them more than anger would have. Clara, irritated by his composure, leaned closer. "What are you waiting for? You think staying quiet will change anything? You're not first class. Not today. Not ever." The murmur in the cabin grew thicker. Someone whispered, "He hasn't raised his voice once." Another muttered, "But look at her, screaming like she owns the plane." In row 4, a woman around 30 adjusted her phone discreetly. "This is going online," she mouthed to her friend. Nicole's jaw tightened. "Sir, stand up now, or you'll be escorted off this aircraft." Marcus blinked slowly, deliberately, eyes calm as stone. He had heard these ultimatums before, dressed in bank uniforms, hotel blazers, and now Navy flight attendant suits. It was never about policy. It was about perception. The cabin was no longer neutral. It was divided. Some eyes sharp with judgment, others wide with disbelief. Phones were raised, recording angles of power colliding in a narrow aisle. And Marcus? He hadn't moved an inch. The aisle was still, every eye locked on Marcus, as if the cabin itself waited for him to explode. But the explosion never came. Instead, Marcus breathed in once, deep and steady. His shoulders stayed relaxed. His hands never clenched. He didn't rise to Clara's bait, didn't answer Nicole's threat. He simply stood there, silent, like a monument no storm could move. The silence unsettled them. Nicole tapped her foot against the carpet, arms crossed tighter. "Sir, ignoring crew instructions is grounds for removal," she pressed, her voice higher now, frustration leaking through the cracks. Clara shook her head dramatically, speaking louder than necessary. "See, he can't even defend himself. That tells you everything." She leaned back smugly, as though the matter were closed. But Marcus's calm presence worked differently on the passengers. David Lawson, mid-40s in row 3, leaned forward, brow furrowed. He's not resisting. He whispered to his seatmate. He's just standing there. The woman beside him, late 30s, nodded. It's almost like he knows something we don't. Across the aisle, another passenger in her 30s lifted her phone a little higher. "Look at him," she murmured, her camera rolling. Not a word, and they're losing control. The air had shifted. What Clara meant as dominance now read as desperation. What Nicole called protocol now sounded like prejudice, and Marcus's silence. It began to feel less like surrender and more like strategy. Nicole snapped her fingers toward the intercom panel. "Captain will be notified. This ends now." Still, Marcus said nothing. He tilted his head slightly, eyes steady, posture unshaken. The kind of composure forged not in comfort, but in years of being tested, doubted, underestimated. He remembered a bank lobby at 25. Security called on him for trying to withdraw from his own account. He remembered a hotel desk at 32. Told his reservation didn't exist until proof silenced them. The pattern was old, the stage was new, and here in the narrow aisle of first class, Marcus knew silence wasn't weakness. It was evidence. Evidence every camera was catching. Evidence every passenger could feel tightening around the cabin. Clara scoffed, exasperated. "You think staying quiet makes you dignified? No, it makes you guilty." She shoved her bag closer against the seatback, marking territory again, but her words rang hollow now, too sharp, too defensive. A few heads turned, brows raised in disapproval. A whisper drifted. "Why is she shouting? He hasn't even spoken." Nicole's voice cracked under the weight of the silence. "Sir, last warning. Speak up or leave." And finally, just barely, Marcus shifted his gaze, slow and deliberate, locking eyes with her. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The weight of calm was louder than any outburst. The cabin felt it. A pressure building, a storm gathering. Marcus hadn't moved, he hadn't spoken, but somehow control was already sliding his way. The red glow of a recording light blinked in the corner of the cabin. Emma Larson, 36, a consultant from Denver, had her phone raised just above the seat back. Her lips pressed tight, her eyes narrowing. She whispered to the man beside her, "This doesn't look right. I'm filming." The man, Michael Grant, 42, leaned closer. "Yeah, keep it steady. People need to see this." He angled his head toward Marcus, then at Clara. "She's yelling like she owns the plane." He hasn't even said a word. The cabin buzzed in hushed tones like static under a broadcast. A woman in her late 20s leaned across the aisle toward Nicole. "Excuse me," she said carefully. "I saw his boarding pass. It looked valid." Nicole froze for half a second, then snapped, "Stay out of this, ma'am. Crew will handle it." But the comment was already out, bouncing around the rows. Someone else muttered, "If it's valid, why hasn't she checked it?" Another voice answered, "Because she doesn't want to." Clara threw her hands up theatrically, drawing eyes back to her. "Unbelievable. We can't even take off because this man won't leave a seat that isn't his." Her tone was sharp. But underneath it was a flicker of unease. Emma's phone caught every syllable. She glanced at Michael. "If this goes online, it'll blow up in minutes." Michael nodded. "Already is. I'm uploading." A hush fell as passengers noticed more cameras rising, more phones angled toward the scene. Dozens of silent witnesses transforming into a digital jury. Marcus remained motionless, his silence radiating like gravity. The calm in his stance made the chaos around him louder, exposing every crack in Clara's performance and every flaw in Nicole's authority. David Lawson, mid-40s in row 3, finally spoke up. Not to Marcus, but to Nicole. "Ma'am, with respect, I think you should actually read his ticket." His voice carried weight. Steady, unmistakably adult, Nicole stiffened. "Sir, please don't interfere." But David didn't back down. "This is interference, by you. He hasn't done a thing. We've all seen it." Gasps rippled softly across the cabin. Passengers weren't whispering anymore. They were speaking, challenging, shifting the balance. Clara's face flushed crimson. She slammed her palm against the armrest. "Are you people blind? Look at him! He doesn't fit here. He doesn't belong here." The words landed heavy, ugly. Phones caught them all. Emma's eyes widened. Michael shook his head. Someone further back muttered, "That's enough." Nicole adjusted her stance, flustered. "Everyone, please remain calm. We'll resolve this." But her voice lacked the control it had moments ago. Authority was slipping, and Marcus? Still calm, still silent. But now he wasn't standing alone. The cabin had begun to fracture, not against him but around him. The storm was no longer his to endure, it was theirs to justify. The murmur of passengers swelled until the aisle felt like a stage. Phones hovered in midair, catching every word, every gesture. The quiet luxury of first class had become a courtroom, and Clara and Nicole were losing ground. Nicole straightened, forcing her voice louder. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We're experiencing a minor delay." But the quiver in her tone betrayed her. She turned back to Marcus, jaw tight. "Sir, this is the last time I'll tell you. Vacate this seat." Clara seized the opening, her voice sharp and theatrical. "If you don't remove him, I will call security myself. This is ridiculous." She shoved her bag further into the seat as if sheer force could erase his boarding pass. "He's not first class. Look at him. This whole thing is a scam." A chorus of disapproval bubbled from the rows. A woman in her 30s whispered, "Why is she yelling?" A man in his 40s muttered, "Because he won't." Then the aisle shifted. Daniel Pierce, the flight service manager, 47, emerged from the galley. Tall, crisp uniform, voice like steel. His presence was meant to restore order. Instead, it only poured gasoline. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked, though his eyes were already fixed on Marcus, not Clara. Nicole jumped in quickly. "This passenger is refusing to leave a seat that isn't his. He presented invalid documents." Marcus remained still. His pass rested in Nicole's hand, unopened, unread. Daniel didn't ask to see it. He simply folded his arms. "Sir, first-class seats are for our premium travellers. You need to comply." David Lawson from row 3 leaned forward again. "With respect, manager, none of you have checked his ticket. It's valid. I saw it." Daniel's eyes flicked to him, sharp. "Sir, stay out of this." Then, back to Marcus. "We're not doing this today. You can move quietly or security will move you." Gasps rippled. Someone whispered, "They're not even hiding it anymore." Clara smirked, emboldened. "Finally. Thank you. Get him out of here." Emma Larson's phone caught every word. Her lips pressed together as she whispered to Michael, "They just confirmed it. It's bias, not protocol." Nicole's hand hovered near the intercom again. "Captain, stand by for removal." The energy in the cabin thickened, oppressive. Marcus hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved an inch. Yet the crew, the passengers, the weight of judgment pressed tighter around him like walls closing in. The difference was clear now. Clara's rage was loud. Nicole's authority cracked. Daniel's tone was final. But Marcus, his silence was louder than them all. The cabin held its breath. Something was about to break. The aisle narrowed with tension, every breath sharp, every whisper caught on camera. Daniel Pierce's voice was iron. "This is your last chance. Move now or be escorted off." He stood tall, arms folded, his uniform crisp, his gaze cold. The authority of the airline pressed down like a gavel. Marcus didn't move, didn't blink. His silence pressed harder than resistance. Clara rose halfway from her seat, pointing a polished finger at him. "Do you see this? He's mocking us, standing there like he has a right to be here." Her tone cracked, desperate yet vicious. Then she shoved her Louis Vuitton bag into Marcus's chest, forcing it against him as though he were luggage to be discarded. Gasps swept the cabin. Someone shouted, "That's assault!" Another voice, sharper, "Keep recording." Nicole snatched the boarding pass from Marcus's hand without permission, waving it like evidence already proven false. She barely glanced at the name before shoving it back against his chest. "This is fake. Sit in economy or leave this aircraft. Those are your options." The cameras caught it all, the shove, the dismissive tone, the refusal verify. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly, the only movement betraying the storm inside. Still, no words left his mouth. Emma Larson, still filming, whispered fiercely to Michael. She didn't even read it. "They're humiliating him." Clara stepped closer, her voice dripping with venom. "You don't belong here, and everyone knows it. People like you never do." She spat the words with a twisted smile, satisfied with the cruelty. The cabin erupted. A passenger in row 430s stood up halfway. "Enough! That's blatant discrimination!" Another shouted, "He's done nothing wrong." Daniel raised a hand for silence, but his voice wavered now. "Everyone stay seated. We'll handle this." His words rang hollow, drowned by the collective outrage. Nicole tried again, louder, harsher. "Sir, if you don't move immediately, I will have law enforcement waiting at the gate." Her voice cracked under the weight of judgmental stares. Clara delivered the final blow, loud enough for every phone to catch. First class is not for people like him. The sentence hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Passengers gasped, some recoiling, others pressing phones higher. The line had been crossed, not just insult but humiliation carved in public. Marcus remained still, his silence unbroken, but behind the calm in his eyes was a decision, a storm, waiting for release. The cabin knew it too. The tide was about to turn. The cabin was still buzzing from Clara's last words when Marcus moved for the first time. Not toward her, not toward the seat. He reached into his hoodie pocket, slow and steady, pulling out a sleek black phone. The glow of the screen lit his face as he tapped once, then lifted it to his ear. The passengers leaned in, phones tilted higher, every eye fixed on him. "Activate protocol," Marcus said quietly, his voice low but resonant, calm, unhurried. The kind of tone that didn't ask. It commanded. On the other end, a voice responded instantly, crisp and professional. "Understood, sir, logging everything. Dispatching legal team to the terminal now." Gasps rippled through the aisle. Emma lowered her phone for half a second, stunned, before snapping it back up. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to Michael. "Legal team?" Clara scoffed, but her smirk faltered. "Oh, please, probably calling a buddy to fake some story." Yet her voice carried less bite, the edges dulled by doubt. Nicole frowned, shifting uncomfortably. "Sir, you cannot use your phone during—" Marcus lowered the device slightly, eyes steady on her. Just one look. Not aggressive, not loud, but the weight of it made her voice trail off. He returned to the call. "Record every second. I want transcripts filed before wheels up." "Yes, sir," the voice replied, already in motion. Phones caught everything, his words, his composure, the way he never raised his tone. Passengers exchanged glances, whispers threading the cabin. "Who talks like that?" someone muttered. "Sounds like a boss giving orders," another replied. "Not a passenger, not a fraud." Clara crossed her arms tightly, shifting in her seat. For the first time, uncertainty clouded her face. "He's bluffing," she muttered, though the conviction was gone. Daniel Pierce stepped forward, trying to reclaim control. "Sir, whatever calls you're making won't change airline policy. You need to leave that seat." Marcus ended the call with one press. The screen went dark. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, then looked up. Calm, unshaken. He still hadn't raised his voice, still hadn't argued. But something in the air had shifted. Emma whispered, "That didn't sound like a man begging for a seat. That sounded like a man who owns the place." Michael nodded slowly, eyes wide. "Exactly, and they don't even realize who they're dealing with." The crew stood tense. Clara sat frozen. The passengers leaned in, sensing the current had changed. Marcus remained silent once more. But his silence no longer looked like submission. It looked like power. The cabin held its breath. The silence was no longer about waiting. It was about wondering. Wondering who this man was, who spoke like command yet stood so quietly, who endured insults without flinching. Marcus finally broke that silence. His voice was even, calm, each word cut with precision. "My name is Marcus Johnson," he said, his gaze moving from Nicole to Daniel, then finally resting on Clara. "I am the majority shareholder of this airline." The words dropped heavy, undeniable. For a beat, no one reacted. The cabin was frozen as though the announcement had short-circuited the air. Then the murmurs erupted like a storm breaking. "What did he say?" "Shareholder, majority." "No way. Did you record that?" Emma's phone trembled in her hands as she whispered, "I got all of it. Every second." Michael leaned closer, eyes wide. "This is going viral in minutes." Clara's face drained of colour. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no words formed. The certainty she had worn like armour shattered in front of everyone. Nicole blinked rapidly, her professional mask cracking. That can't be." She clutched the boarding pass again, this time really looking at it, her eyes scanning the printed name. Marcus Johnson. Seat 2A. Valid. Daniel Pierce's stance faltered, authority bleeding out of his posture. He cleared his throat, voice shaky. "Sir, if that's true..." Marcus's gaze sharpened. "It is true, and if you'd taken 5 seconds to do your job, you would have known it." His tone never rose, but the weight of it filled the cabin. Passengers leaned in, eyes wide, phones up. Some began whispering to one another, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The narrative had flipped, and everyone knew it. Clara sputtered, voice thin. You could have said that earlier." Marcus tilted his head slightly, calm. "I don't have to announce who I am to sit in a seat I purchased. Respect should not depend on introduction. The line landed like thunder. Phones caught it, passengers nodded, some even clapped softly. Nicole swallowed hard, her cheeks flushed. "Sir, I apologize." But Marcus cut her off with silence, the kind sharper than words. Clara slumped back into her seat, eyes darting to the floor, hands trembling. Daniel looked away, his authority reduced to nothing in front of the very passengers he was meant to command. And Marcus? He simply stood taller, not because he raised his voice, but because the truth had raised him above them all. The cabin was no longer divided. It was united, around him. The revelation hung in the air, heavy as thunder that refused to fade. Phones stayed raised, catching every reaction. The power had shifted, not with shouting, but with truth. Clara White collapsed back into her seat, sunglasses slipping down the tray table. The confident curl of her lips was gone, replaced with a trembling jaw. I didn't know," she whispered, voice breaking, but the cabin caught it anyway. Nicole Harris stood frozen in the aisle, boarding pass still in her hand. Her cheeks burned crimson. The words she had used with certainty, not valid, moved to economy, fake, now mocked her in front of dozens of witnesses. She tried to speak, her voice catching. "Sir, I deeply regret." But her apology only made the silence around her heavier. Daniel Pierce, the service manager, cleared his throat. Authority was supposed to belong to him, yet his voice shook. "Mr. Johnson, if there's been a misunderstanding," he couldn't finish. Even he heard how hollow it sounded. Passengers filled the silence for him. Misunderstanding? That was humiliation. She shoved her bag at him. They all treated him like trash until now. A ripple of applause broke out from row 4, soft but defiant. Someone clapped harder, joined by others. Not everyone, but enough for the sound to sting. Emma Larson whispered into her phone camera. They had no idea who they were messing with, and he didn't even need to raise his voice. Her recording streamed live now, the comments piling up in real time. Clara's hands fumbled for her bag, clutching it tight against her lap. Her earlier arrogance shrank into silence. Nicole shifted her stance, glancing down the aisle as though hoping the ground would swallow her whole. Daniel kept his arms folded, but the authority he tried to project no longer reached anyone. Marcus didn't move quickly. He didn't need to. He took one step forward, calm, steady. His voice was low, deliberate. "You all made one mistake. You thought silence meant weakness. It never has." Gasps echoed, some passengers nodding, others whispering, "That line, that's power." Phones captured it from every angle. Clara covered her face with her hands. Nicole blinked back tears, her authority unraveling in front of the very passengers she was meant to guide. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, the weight of a collapsing hierarchy pressing on him. The cabin had turned. The humiliation once aimed at Marcus now circled back on them, magnified by the very witnesses who had been silent before. And Marcus? He stood steady, composed, letting the truth carry more force than anger ever could. The aisle was silent again, but this silence felt different. It wasn't tension, it was expectation. Every passenger leaned forward, phones raised, waiting for Marcus to decide what would happen next. Marcus lifted his gaze, calm, unwavering. His voice was quiet, yet carried through the cabin like a verdict. "Remove her from this seat. Effective immediately." His words landed like a hammer. Clara jerked upright, clutching her bag tight to her chest. "You can't," she started, but the weight of every eye in the cabin pinned her down. She had been bold a moment ago, but now her voice cracked, thin and brittle. Daniel Pierce's throat tightened. He looked from Marcus to Clara, then back again. His training said de-escalate. His pride said defend the crew. But neither mattered now. Authority no longer belonged to him. Nicole blinked rapidly, stunned. "Sir, do you mean?" Marcus didn't flinch. "You heard me. Remove her, then call your captain. Tell him I'll expect a report on your conduct by the time we land." Gasps filled the rows. Emma's phone trembled in her grip, capturing every second. She whispered to Michael, "He just flipped the script. He's giving orders, and they're listening." Daniel tried to steady his voice. "Mr. Johnson, perhaps we can resolve this without—" Marcus cut him off with a glance sharp enough to silence him. "You've already resolved it. With your silence, with your inaction, you chose sides. Now you'll deal with the consequence." Nicole swallowed, eyes downcast. The authority she'd wielded minutes ago had evaporated. Her hands shook as she turned to Clara. "Ma'am, I need you to gather your belongings." Clara's mouth fell open. "This is absurd." Now, Nicole said, her voice breaking under Marcus's gaze. The cabin erupted in murmurs, some cheering, some gasping. Passengers who had whispered in fear before now spoke boldly. About time! She deserves it. That's justice right there. Clara fumbled with her bag, shoving items inside, her face pale. She avoided every camera, every eye. But there was no hiding. Her humiliation was already immortalized. Nicole stepped aside, trembling. Marcus turned his gaze to her. You're relieved of duty, effective immediately. When we land, you'll speak to my office. Until then, sit down. Do not address me again. Nicole's knees nearly buckled. She nodded, defeated, and sank into an empty crew seat. Daniel tried once more, voice small now. Mr. Johnson. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Save it. You'll explain yourself later. For now, you'll run this flight in silence. The authority in the cabin had been rewritten, not by shouting, not by force, but by a quiet verdict carried in calm words that no one dared defy. Passengers erupted into applause, the sound filling the cabin like thunder. Some stood, clapping harder, their cameras flashing. And Marcus sat down, finally, into seat 2A. Not as a passenger fighting for a chair, but as the man who owned the sky above them. Marcus lowered himself into seat 2A at last, moving with the ease of someone who had nothing left to prove. He adjusted the seatbelt, placed his phone neatly on the tray table, and leaned back as if the chaos of minutes before had never happened. But the cabin knew. It wasn't just a man taking his seat. It was a declaration, a verdict, a reminder of who truly held the power. Clara sat several rows back now, cheeks pale, eyes cast down. Nicole remained in the crew seat, trembling, her hands folded tight in her lap. Daniel stood near the galley, silent, the authority drained from his posture. The passengers filled the quiet with applause, first soft, then louder, rolling down the aisle like a wave. Some clapped slowly, deliberately, others cheered outright. Phones stayed raised, capturing the moment from every angle. Marcus didn't acknowledge the applause immediately. He simply rested, letting the sound wash over him. Only when the cabin quieted again did he speak, calm, measured, every word precise. Respect should never depend on appearances, he said, his voice low but carrying. The seat doesn't make the person makes the seat. The words struck deeper than any outburst could have. Emma whispered into her phone camera, That's it. That's the line. History, right here. Michael beside her nodded, clapping harder. He didn't just win an argument, he showed them what real power looks like. A man in row 3, David Lawson, exhaled audibly. Never seen anything like it, he said, shaking his head, his voice thick with respect. The energy in the cabin had changed entirely. Where there had been division, now there was unity. Where there had been judgment, now there was reverence. Marcus hadn't only reclaimed his seat, he had redefined it. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, recalling the sting of past humiliations. The banker at 25, the hotel manager at 32, the countless moments that had told him he didn't belong. This time, in front of dozens of witnesses and countless more who would watch the recording, the script had changed. Not because he shouted, not because he demanded, but because he remained still when others wavered, calm when others lost control. When he opened his eyes again, the cabin was watching, waiting. Marcus gave a single nod. Nothing more. But it was enough. The flight attendants who remained shuffled quietly, service trays clinking, avoiding his gaze. Passengers exchanged glances, shaking their heads at what they had just witnessed, already drafting captions for the viral clips in their hands. The storm had passed, but its echo would carry far beyond this plane. And Marcus Johnson, black CEO, majority shareholder of the very airline he was nearly thrown off, sat in his seat without raising his voice, yet commanding the respect of everyone on board. The applause rose again, filling the cabin with a sound not of pity, not of spectacle, but of recognition. The sky outside stretched endless, quiet. Inside, dignity had reclaimed its place.